you know where we could have needed a more powerful Switch, Ian? To play those N64 games now available on expansion pack for Switch Online.
Wow. It's going to be a tricky segue between the official end of the...
that was the segue, Ian.
The segue. Yeah.
So, this came out today. It's online. It's online or late last night. The expansion pack is online. Remember what that is. $50 a year to get your previous Switch Online stuff. And then you get not just the NES and SNES games. Now you get some Genesis titles and N64 games there. And you also had the ability to buy Genesis and N64 Switch controllers, which is interesting. If you are a Switch Online member, which I have not ordered because I don't see the point right now in doing it. So it seems like it's very, very mixed, the reaction to the emulation so far.
And it does seem to be dependent somewhat on the title. But people are saying that, basically Mario Kart 64 and WinBack aren't using expansion pack settings when they obviously could and should be.
You mean the old school expansion pack?
Actual, when they should be. They said there's lag. Zelda is the one that everyone keeps talking about that has quite a bit of input lag, which is, I don't know, bizarre. People are saying that the Wii U download version of Ocarina of Time is, better than the one that's currently offered on this expansion pack. But apparently the Genesis emulation seems to be fine, so it really comes down to the emulators that they're using. People have looked
at the M2, maybe?
Maybe, because M2 would have handled the emulation for the Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One packages, because these are different games, but there were already emulation packs released for Sega Genesis on this system, and the emulation was largely done by M2, I believe. So M2's emulation is really good, so maybe they're using M2's emulation and emulators. That would make sense why that wouldn't be as big of a deal. The N64 emulation is being done, however, they said they discovered can't remember the name, but it's the same emulator that was used for Super Mario 64 on the 3D All-Stars game. And I guess it worked okay for that, but they tried to spread out its usage to these other N64 games, and it's not really doing the job.
I saw obviously people were doing button tests on Ocarina, and it was bad. It was like at least a quarter-second delay of the jump from just my eyes seeing it.
Sure.
And we're experts at looking at button lag because of another console coming out. So some people were like trying to be apologists and say, "Oh, what's the matter? He's jumping." It's like you cannot have that much lag when you're playing an action-oriented game. You can't have like a quarter second or a half second between a jump. Are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? And then people were comparing it with other versions of the game, and it's like you can clearly see that instant or not. Like I said, what's weird is that it's weird to be game to game. If they're using whatever the I think someone said it's the same emulator that they were using for the Mario All-Stars pack.
That's what I just said.
Oh yeah, okay. So if that's the case, why would it be that much worse on certain games?
I mean, if it's just an in-house emulator, maybe they just had it optimized for Mario 64. You've used N64 emulation before, and it can be wildly different from game to game, and it can be...
Sure.
And you can change settings from game to game.
Sure, but the first party you think they'd have buttoned up, especially since they've been doing this back to the Virtual Console and the Wii. They've been doing this.
I've seen
from
this.
What people are saying, this is worse than the Virtual Console.
Yeah, who knows?
It
could just be something new that they're starting. Like you said, it's probably because they're using a more recent emulator. They're not. It doesn't sound like they're using the same emulator that they've put work into over the years. It sounded like they started from scratch, and I don't know why they would do that.
The worst thing I saw, and this is what I'll go into about when people used to get on me for saying N64 emulation is fine when it's not, and this is case number one why it's not. If Nintendo can't get it freaking right, I saw the Mario Kart online multiplayer. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter, 4-player, and it was unplayable. When I saw it, it was like you're getting like 6 frames a second, 8 frames a second. Like it was bad. And when you see that, that's like, wow, they literally are probably they have not made any leaps and bounds in N64 emulation. I thought maybe Nintendo would have. They have potentially the tools to do that. They have the code of their own console, and they haven't. It's almost shocking, but not shocking based on how complex the architecture is on the N64 and how it may never get perfected.
Well, the other thing is,
or will take a long time to.
there are N64 emulators that are much closer, and like Frank Cifaldi actually said an hour ago, and it's a common sentiment whenever emulation comes up like this on like a commercially released product. I mean, one of the times is, or one of the reasons is, quite frankly, the corporations don't have the time or the knowledge to put into it that hobbyists and amateur people do.
Sure.
And because emulation is looked at as such a dirty thing by these big businesses, they almost never are willing to reach out and bridge the gap and use these emulators that have been around for years that can actually do what they're trying to do. So they go with an in-house option that's never going to be as good.
Sure. But going back to the point about the N64 emulation, it's not accurate to the look still. That's why going through this, if you can get awesome emulation that's like 60 frames, but it won't look like how it looked originally. You need a beefy GPU setup, and you need a great computer to do that. And that's what the team's been suffering through, trying to do this. And you still need workarounds depending upon the game. Like it's not a one size fits all batch thing. But this is embarrassing. I would think if you were Nintendo, you should be embarrassed by this.
It's gross.
You should not have put this out and charged $30 more per year if these games were not like, I don't say they got to be perfect. You can't have this. I'm looking at this online multiplayer that looks unplayable, and you can't have a quarter to half a second of input lag on a jump on any of your games.
That's what I talked about when we talked about this last week or the week before when they officially announced it. Nintendo doesn't have the goodwill in this area to be charging $50 for that pass. In the past, we said that the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, the online play was bad. I mentioned that. I didn't think that this was magically going to be fixed. But I think a lot of people, unfortunately, looked at it and said, well, if Nintendo's charging this much for it, then it's going to be good. And it's like, no, they've given you no reason to think that. And that's my whole problem with this expansion pass. It's not even so much the money, because as we talked about, Sony and Microsoft offer the same. It's roughly the same price. It's what you get with the Nintendo Pass, and it's not up to snuff. You cannot be charging this much for stuff that does not play properly.
Yeah, and then if they had online issues with the NES and Super Nintendo games, which that emulation should be just about perfect at this point. The N64 is not perfect emulation, and you still have potential online
problems
issues on top. I saw some people try to be an apologist and wow, we're criticizing Nintendo. Yes, we do that, and I don't know how, like the speedrunner. I have a Screen Rant article I just linked here. A speedrunner, what's their name here? Too Fool pointed out that the input lag for 64 was hot garbage despite its faithful visuals. Followed the complaint with a video demonstrating Ocarina of Time's own input lag, showing their Nintendo Switch Pro controller and TV screen in real time for reference.
Oh, so it's not good for Mario either.
The speedrunner ZFG echoed this evidence, concluding that Ocarina of Time on Switch is so bad it might actually be worse than Wii U Virtual Console's version, a remark which carries considerable weight given their renown in this game speedrunning community. However, Twofool clarified in a later tweet that Switch N64 game input lag varies by title, as Mario Tennis allegedly has considerably less lag. That's what makes it so weird, the game-to-game thing on the input lag. I can picture it being more stuttery in some games, or obviously a Mario 64 for Mario Kart 64 for the multiplayer. But like, it's even when you're playing on an emulated computer, there's no different input lag on an emulator that I've seen. There's no different input lag, so that's just so weird to me that they didn't button that up. And they're saying it's worse than the 7-year-old Wii U Virtual Console. Is that 7 years old? Yeah, 7 years old. And I looked at some videos, and yeah, you see people tapping the button, and okay.
Yeah, the video for the Mario Kart 64 multiplayer is absolutely abysmal.
It's unplayable.
And that's basically the experience I was expecting. That was my experience playing NES and Super Nintendo games.
I'm looking at
someone just constant choppy.
I'm looking at
animation.
I'm looking at Twofool. He's saying this input lag is hot garbage for Mario 64. It might not look horrible, but it feels awful. On that video, it doesn't look considerably bad, but this is a speedrunner. They know when it's off.
Sure.
But the Ocarina lag is like, you can not just see that with your naked eye. You can feel how bad that would be to play that if it's like gets up to like a quarter second.
Oh, wow. Yeah, his thumb is fully up before Link does the backflip.
Yes,
yeah.
that's unplayable. And some people were trying to say, "Oh, it's fine, he's jumping." It's like, no, you can't.
It's okay to criticize people and things and stuff you like.
Yeah.
It's how it gets better. It's the only way to make it better.
No need to defend Nintendo on this.
You can criticize it.
Yeah, I don't know how this happens. I don't know how Nintendo could think this would go over well. I just don't.
Because people generally don't trash Nintendo enough when it comes to
no,
stuff
Nintendo
like
gets trashed a lot. You don't think that's it? I don't think they just care. Or maybe they think the casuals wouldn't care as long as they can play Ocarina and Mario Kart. It's like, oh, who cares? But it's like, no, you expect that. That's the thing about Nintendo. We talk about Nintendo's first party games. That you may not like the games themselves, but technically, they're good to go, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a horrible experience. There's not major game breaking bugs or something that ruins your experience just trying to get through the game. This ruins your experience.
Right.
This is Nintendo doing something super uncharacteristic. If you're telling me these games aren't as nice as they were 15 years ago on the Wii
U, they were talking about. That was the one they were comparing it to the Wii U one.
Was Wii U one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 7 years ago versus 15. I guess I'd love to see someone go back and compare it to the Wii ones then and see if they were.
Yeah, right.
Like why not? They had Genesis games on there, and they had
GameCube
N64
ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, this wouldn't be acceptable if this was $20 a month. Still wouldn't be acceptable for Nintendo to put this out, in my opinion. You don't put out an unfinished product like this. Let's see. There's Frank's response, which you went over. People are memeing it, of course. And now the article's coming out saying people aren't happy with it. Like I said before, I wasn't interested in this, even if these were functional at $50. I just didn't see the need right now.
No, but absolutely not at non-functional.
No, eat your what, Ian?
I don't know. I stopped myself. Eat my.
This one person at SW Shrib says, don't buy it. Input lag, online frame drops and stutters, inconsistent fog effect in-game for immersion. Confusing button mapping. Yes, you can't remap the buttons, and it seemed like
they said, and I don't know which game it was, but something had the buttons as X and Y instead of A and B or something like that.
So the orientation was different versus the N64
yeah.
controller. No controller pack features. What? That's not built into the emulator? No controller pack? What do you mean? You can't fucking save it? Save your game and load up games? Is that for real?
I think they mean no expansion pack.
Oh, no expansion pack.
That's what I had read.
Okay, that's insane as well. That's built into emulators.
Yeah,
you click a button. It's the what is it? The 8 meg versus 4 meg or whatever it is. Extra 4 meg.
It's an extra 4 meg. Yeah,
that's all it is. That's all the option is, and then it unlocks it. No CRT effect to hide the unpolished textures. Wow. Okay. Like they didn't put on a filter to make it look like the original or have the option to. So it doesn't even look like the original N64 games on top. So at that point, you might have upscaled it then. At that point, if you're not getting the traditional look, yeah, this is bad. I'm trying to remember a time when Nintendo screwed up something this royally bad on something that should have been like a slam dunk or something that should have been like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Everyone should love this.
Yeah, and I don't know. Yeah, like we just said, this is particularly bad because people were upset going in.
Yes, do you think Nintendo will see their error and be like, all right, we're gonna give you something? They did it on the 3DS when they lowered the price and gave away free games because that was a disaster. That was a big disaster when that was $250 when it came out. Yeah, 3DS.
Well, that was a great turnaround. I don't know that they'll do that with this. And that's why I said I have no interest in this expansion pack until a year has passed and I see what they do with it, because I figured it's just going to be more of the same shit.
Do you think do they even have an incentive to try to fix the emulation? Do they? This is the problem now. They're going to, if they announce more games for this on the N64 side and they still have these problems, they're going to face a wave of criticism each and every month or every 2 months when they announce new games.
Yes.
If they come out with like Banjo on here, or they're not going to be able to get GoldenEye, unfortunately, because all the rights issues. But if they did that and it was unplayable, say if GoldenEye did come out and everyone would get it for the multiplayer and it was unplayable, why even have it then?
This is the problem. That, as we said, this has always been an issue with their online service. But while yes, there are definitely 8 and 16-bit games that we all remember playing together and we enjoy in multiplayer. N64 is a multiplayer system.
Yeah, it's a party
These games
console.
are absolutely going to be tested online with other people, more so than NES and Super Nintendo. NES and Super Nintendo don't have great outline. Fine, you're still playing Donkey Kong Country and Zelda 2 and Super Metroid and all that stuff by yourself. But with the N64, with the exception of stuff like Mario and Zelda, you know, everything else
Mario Party
is a Smash Brothers,
Smash Brothers,
all the first person shooters,
all the
Turok, GoldenEye,
all the racing games.
racing. Yep.
Want to play Cruising? I love to play Cruising USA. You know, multiplayer. Why not? Just for the fun of it. Now you tell me it'll be like 4 frames a second.
Yeah.
You know, against someone.
So
It's disappointing. Hopefully they can turn this around and fix this emulation. But as Frank alluded to, you have people that have been working on these emulators for decades, and Nintendo's probably like, it's an afterthought to us.
right.
It is what it is. So, but this is bad. And unfortunately, I don't know if this is a Nintendo Japan thing where, you know, if they got to communicate, maybe Nintendo America's gonna be like, hey, we need to fix this, and Japan will be like, well, who cares? We're gonna get all that Animal Crossing DLC money, you know,
Right.
whew, it's bad.